Hello, everyone. Welcome to my final project recording. So, my student choice project was on the ethical and legal issues surrounding admissions. So, without further ado, let's just get into it. The issues I will be discussing today are the college admissions scandal, fair admissions versus Harvard, and of course, more FERPA. The college admissions scandal is this. It was a criminal conspiracy to rig undergraduate admissions decisions at several prestigious U.S. institutions, and this was made public in 2019. You may have heard about this when it happened. It was a rather large news event. Many large publications such as the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, really anything that you can imagine was actively involved in covering this. It was also widely publicized because of the involvement of celebrities. So this scam in total had 53 people who were accused of involvement, and they varied on many levels, some giving more money, some giving less, some having more direct involvement, some having less involvement, and we'll get into that a little bit more later. So William Rick Singer is the man who organized this scheme. He was using the money that he would get from these celebrities or wealthy individuals to alter exam scores as well as to bribe university officials. So he would take a chunk of it for himself, as I understand, and then the rest of it he would use to change these exam scores or bribe the university officials. So the accused are reported to have spent between $200,000 and $6.5 million on getting their kids into these prestigious schools. Now, that's, of course, an absurd amount of money. Even when you consider how expensive college is now, they are paying leaps and bounds more than what paying full tuition at really any institution. So this is just an absurd amount of money, and it goes to show that going to these prestigious institutions still means a lot. So the crimes that were alleged include felony conspiracy to commit mail fraud and honest services fraud. Those are defined, mail fraud is defined as federal crimes in the United States that involve mailing or electronically transmitting something associated with fraud. And honest services fraud is defined as a scheme or artifice to deprive another of intangible right of honest services. And in this case, this would be the right to a fair admissions process. So some celebrities included in this scandal are Felicity Huffman, who was apparently on Desperate Housewives. I never watched, but I believe was extremely popular, I want to say 15 years ago, which is disturbing because we're all really old now. And Lori Loughlin is, was an actress on Full House and Fuller House, which I did watch as a kid, so I have a little bit of background on. And the remaining individuals appear to be lesser known actors or actresses or celebrities, or they were simply more wealthy individuals who were, depending on your perspective, lucky or unlucky enough to be involved in this. So which institutions were targeted? The institutions included, but were not limited to, Georgetown University, Stanford University, UCLA, USC, and Yale University. So a little bit of a spoiler alert. We talked about this in Michael's class, I believe it was yesterday, that having these rather large name brand universities is extremely important to a lot of people still. Having that big name attached will allow students to have good networking connections, or even just having that name on a resume is enough, in their opinion, to get them a job. So that is something that is still very prevalent. So why is this important? We just talked about it a little bit. And put in quotations around doctor with Dr. Phil, because he's not exactly the most popular guy around here. But anyway, Dr. Phil is more qualified to answer this question because he already has with his bit about how when people ask, where is your child going to college? They want them to say Harvard, Yale, or Princeton, or wherever. They don't want to hear, oh, my child's going to Slippery Rock, not knowing that Slippery Rock is actually a good school, and apparently, so he says, not knowing that Slippery Rock was a school at all, which I'm still not sure if I'm willing to buy that. But that goes to show the lengths that people will go to say that my child went to X or Y university. So why is this important? So I would like for all of you to look at this from a number of perspectives, including why is this important for us when we are potentially in the future going to send our children to colleges or universities. Additionally, I would like everyone to think about why this is important because of that name brand recognition sort of piece to it, but mainly because this is not only a law class, this is an ethics class. What ethically are the larger problems associated with this scandal? So if you want, take 3 minutes here to pause the video and discuss. So finally, a bit of a wrap up for the admissions scandal. Here's a video that I felt very nicely summed up everything that was involved in this scandal.
This is the man at the center of what the Justice Department says is one of the biggest college admissions scandals in history. Prosecutors say William Singer, also known as Rick, took money from parents to get around the admissions process at elite schools. It shined a light on the extensive and sometimes illegal methods some wealthy parents use to get their kids into colleges. Singer reportedly ran the scam under the guise of his education consulting firm called The Key. The website boasts about helping over 90,000 adults with life coaching and beating the odds to get into college. 2 days after the scandal was made public, most of The Key's website seemed to be offline. Singer marketed his guide to getting into elite universities with an extensive focus on boosting individual credentials, selling parents and students a world where anything is possible. A look at a series of videos on his YouTube page reveals some of the advice he dished out to students.
My key method unlocks the full potential of your son or daughter and sets them on a course to excel in life.
The videos included reenactments of how his company's counselors work with kids.
So I talked to my high school counselor, and he said I only need 3 years of sciences.
Well, Amanda, that would be true for some kids, but not for you. The schools you're applying, the rigor, the competitiveness of the schools you're applying, we're going to need at least 4. In fact, 4 of all the major subject areas.
Singer also pushed the idea of creating a personal brand to stand out among applicants. In this video, he detailed how he coached a former student to take on the environment as her calling card.
She got totally engaged in her brand, in her story, and her passion by creating a youth movement around global warming. Now that she's at college, that brand is continued.
This idea is also the focus of Singer's 2014 book, Getting In, where he touts making a brand as a centerpiece of getting into the school of your choice. Another piece of advice from Singer, find the smartest kids and buddy up.
Go make a group from the smartest kids in class and join that group and create a study group. Everybody's doing it. Everybody's getting extra help, and everybody's creating groups so that they can have success. Don't be afraid to find other people to help you.
Singer also told students and parents that there's no shame in getting additional assistance.
You need to listen to what your teacher has to say and take notes off of the PowerPoints that are given, off the board, and you need to be really, really focused while you're in class. But part of that may be that you'll need to get some help from the outside.
Singer's tips on hard work as the key to success now seem ironic, as the FBI's investigation revealed his central role in rigging the system to help people get ahead. It's unclear if all his clients were clued into these activities, or if some were kept in the dark. This is the man...
Sorry about that. So, hopefully that was a nice bit of a wrap up for my first issue, which was the college admissions scandal. So now moving on to my next issue, which is fair admissions versus Harvard. Some of you may have heard of this court case, some maybe not. It's a lesser known one, I believe, than the college admission scandal. So, excuse me, this case was about, it was a lawsuit that was filed claiming that Harvard discriminates against Asian American students in the institution's admissions process. So this lawsuit was filed in 2014 by an organization called SFFA. Students for Fair Admissions is what that stands for. Started by Edward Bloom, with the goal of ending racial classifications in voting, education, legislation, and employment. So some important information about this case. So this gets back into something that a lot of us have to deal with in our case analyses, actually. So private versus public institutions and what rights are afforded to students and what laws are applicable in those situations. So in this case, while Harvard is a private institution, it receives federal funding, which makes the institution subject to the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is a civil rights and labor law that outlaws discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, national origin, and later to be added were sexual orientation and gender identity. An important precedent in this case is Regents of the University of California versus Bach. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. This case stated that affirmative action was permissible, but racial quotas are not. So that's an important distinction to make. So, some arguments. The plaintiffs claim that Harvard places a, quote, soft racial quota on Asian American students to keep this population artificially low. Conversely, the defendant denied, or in this case being Harvard, denied engaging in this behavior, stating that the institution admitted 17 to 21% Asian American students when the population only reaches about 6%. So those are some interesting little tidbits about where each side is coming from. So the court ruling was that Harvard does not unduly discriminate against Asian American students. In Judge Burroughs' ruling, she states there were no quotas in place at Harvard, despite acknowledging that the school, quote, uses the racial makeup of admitted students to help determine how many students it should admit overall. So what do you all think about this decision? What do you think about the phrasing of this statement? To me, that sounds a little odd. It should, in my opinion, be an all or nothing type of situation. So this is something that I was really interested in this issue in general, and coming into it, I was looking for some answers, and unfortunately, I think I left with more questions, but I think that may have been one of the points of this exercise. So, since this is a really contentious issue and something that I think is really fun to play around with, we now begin this exercise where we are going to split this group up into two groups. So this is something that I don't think we've ever done before and could be a little fun. You might hate me, but that's okay. So follow these directions. Group A and Group B will both be divided by birthday. So the first half of the year will be Group A. Second half of the year will be Group B. So this way, nobody can pick which side. You have to defend the side that you've been given. So in this case, Group A will be defending why monitoring racial numbers at institutions is necessary to promote diversity. And Group B will defend why race should never be a factor in the college admissions process. So this exercise could be fun. So if teams are uneven by any chance, just sort it out. We're about to graduate grad school. I think we can handle that. So just divide teams up and let's see how this goes. Hopefully it won't be a disaster. So pause the video when you're ready and take 5-10 minutes, however long you need to debate these topics. hopefully that all went well. So now a final video that I have that will summarize this case.
On Tuesday, October 1, 2019, the first stage of the lawsuit between anti-affirmative action advocacy group Students for Fair Admissions and Harvard came to a close. Federal Judge Allison D. Burroughs, an Obama appointee, ruled that the college's admissions practices are legal. She cleared Harvard of all 4 counts of alleged wrongdoing: intentionally discriminating against Asian Americans, engaging in racial balancing, using race as a determinative factor in admissions decisions, and inadequately exploring race-neutral alternatives to achieve diversity. Ensuring diversity at Harvard relies, in part, on race-conscious admissions. Harvard's admission program passes constitutional muster, Burroughs wrote. The ruling came almost a year after a 3-week trial last October, and almost 5 years after SFFA filed the lawsuit in November 2014. The decision was a slam dunk for Harvard, according to legal experts. In her decision, Burroughs expounded on the value of diversity in higher education. She wrote that a heterogeneous student body promotes a more robust academic environment with a greater depth and breadth of learning, encourages learning outside of the classroom, and creates a richer sense of community. She also credited the stories of 8 current and former Harvard students who testified at the trial to that effect. Burroughs contended that so long as it is necessary, race-conscious admissions will always have a negative effect on certain populations, including Asian American applicants. Race-conscious admissions will always penalize, to some extent, the groups that are not being advantaged by the process, but this is justified by the compelling interest in diversity and all the benefits that flow from a diverse college population, she wrote. As long as that penalty is not discriminatory in nature and remains in line with the rules set by the Supreme Court, Harvard remains within the law. Burroughs wrote that she took admissions officers at their word regarding their testimony that there was no discrimination against Asian Americans, calling their statements consistent, unambiguous, and convincing. The lead attorney for Students for Fair Admissions, Adam K. Mortora, said he disagrees with how Burroughs handled the issue of discrimination. He cited a 2013 report by Harvard's Office of Institutional Research that found that Asian American applicants consistently receive lower personal ratings than applicants of other races. Personal ratings are numerical scores assigned to applicants based on abstract qualities like humor and grit. No one, not Judge Burroughs, not Harvard, has ever explained how it is that African Americans and Hispanics just have much better objective personal qualities than white and Asian applicants, Mortara said at the law school last week. He also alleged that Harvard runs a thinly disguised quota system for racial categories, which is illegal according to Supreme Court precedent. Though Burroughs ruled that the college's policies are lawful, she contended that the admissions process is imperfect and suggested a number of changes, including requiring admissions officers to participate in implicit bias trainings, maintaining clearer guidelines on the use of race in admissions, and monitoring any race-related statistical disparities. Just 3 days after the ruling, SFFA filed its notice of appeal to the First Circuit Court of Appeals. The next steps in the appeals process will be determined when the clerk of the First Circuit Court issues a briefing schedule dictating when briefs must be filed. According to the First Circuit Court rulebook, the appellant, Students for Fair Admissions, must file a brief within 40 days after the record is filed. Harvard, the appellee, will then have 30 days to serve a reply brief. After the briefing stage, a panel of 3 judges from the First Circuit Court will preside over the appellate hearing and begin work on a decision. After that ruling is handed down, the defeated party may choose to appeal again, either to the whole First Circuit Court or to the Supreme Court of the United States, which has discretion over whether or not it will hear the case. If the Supreme Court takes the case, the ruling has the potential to determine the future of affirmative action at private colleges and universities nationwide. University President Lawrence S. Backhouse said in a recent interview with the Crimson that he is confident Harvard will win in the First Circuit Court, but is uncertain about the university's prospects if the case heads to the Supreme Court, which is currently dominated by 5 conservative-leaning justices. My name is Camille G. Caldera, and I report on admissions and financial aid for the Harvard News.
All right, so hopefully you enjoyed that video. I found that it was very informative. All right, so now that we've all taken our FERPA training, I believe that this was an extremely dense training. I found a lot of it difficult to understand in the moment. So something that really helped me was this video that actually summarized a lot of it really really nicely. I figured that I would spare you all the torture of listening to my voice explaining FERPA one more time. I think I would benefit from watching this video, which really nicely summarizes everything together, and hopefully we can all leave with a better understanding.
The Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, or FERPA, is a federal law which applies to educational institutions and agencies, such as schools, school districts, colleges, and universities, to which funds have been available under any program administered by the Secretary of Education. The purpose of FERPA is to protect the privacy of parents and students with regard to education records under Section 444 of the General Education Provisions Act as amended. Wow, it's easy to get confused with all that legal language. Let's try that again in plain English. The truth is, data about us is everywhere. It's collected when we shop, take a vacation, look at a web page, or send an email. You see, FERPA is a federal law that applies to most schools, colleges, and universities. It's meant to protect all that identifiable information about students in records that are kept by schools, and it provides the right for you to access that information, to seek to correct it, and generally to consent to its disclosure. Let's take a closer look at what that means. Today is Patrick's first day of kindergarten. As Patrick moves through the education system, his schools accumulate data, such as his grades, learning disabilities, or special needs information, and disciplinary information. As Patrick takes tests to see how he's progressing, his scores are protected by FERPA. FERPA requires schools and state and local educational agencies to keep the information that came from Patrick's records private and get his parents' written consent before sharing it with anyone else. There are some exceptions, but the general rule is Patrick's records are confidential. Students don't attend school anonymously, so schools routinely share some basic information about students, called directory information. If a school is going to share directory information, it must notify parents and students who are 18 or over or who attend post-secondary institutions. For example, Patrick's school yearbook contains his name, grade level, and photograph. That's okay because his school designated these items as directory information and published its policy on its website, and Patrick's parents haven't opted out. FERPA also requires schools provide Patrick's parents the ability to review his records to make sure they are accurate. Patrick's applying to college. He and his parents review his high school transcript and discover the school has gotten Patrick confused with another student who has lower grades. This isn't good. FERPA not only gives his parents the right to see the records, but also to request that the school correct mistakes. If Patrick's parents and the school disagree on the accuracy of the info, FERPA gives Patrick's parents the right to request a hearing. Colleges and universities are also required to protect student information under FERPA, but the rules change a bit. Meet Lisa, a high school graduate who is headed off to college. Hooray! While Lisa was in elementary, middle, and high school and under the age of 18, FERPA allowed her parents access to her education records. Now, Lisa is entering college, and her FERPA rights transfer from her parents to her. Her parents wonder, but wait a minute, I'm paying the bills here, and now I can't see how she's doing academically? Since Lisa's parents claim her as a dependent on their federal tax return, her parents can still see her education records if Lisa's college chooses to release them. FERPA doesn't require schools to release records, it only allows this. You may be wondering, how do I find out more about how FERPA affects me or my child? To start, look for your school or school district's FERPA policy on its website, or ask your principal or school administrative staff about your rights under FERPA. Visit the Department of Education's Family Policy Compliance Office website for answers to frequently asked questions on privacy, training, and guidance for parents and students on FERPA rights and protections.
All right, so hopefully that was a help to everyone. I know it was a help to me when I first saw it. That FERPA training was, like I said, rather dense, and this kind of helped me put it in perspective. Obviously, the scope of it isn't nearly as broad and all-encompassing as the training that we had, but I think that going through this little short 4-minute exercise was really helpful in kind of cementing this knowledge in our heads. So thank you all for taking the time to watch my video. Here are my sources, and yeah, congrats to everybody on finishing our master's program. It's really awesome. So that's all I had for you guys. So thanks for watching. Bye-bye.